Welcome, everybody, to episode 44 of Black and Gold Weekly, a weekly Boston Bruins show here on YouTube, brought to you in partnership with Black and Gold Productions. I am your host, John. We've got another week of Bruins action in the books, although really it was just a weekend of Bruins action because I haven't played since Sunday. But we'll be taking a look back on the last couple of games this past weekend. We'll also be looking ahead to this upcoming week of Bruins action. And just want to talk about some of the players on the team who's starting to get going here. And some positive signs that we saw from the Bruins in their past couple of games. Before we get started, I do want to give a big thank you to Mark Allred and the entire team at BNG Productions. The show is in partnership with them and would not be happening without their support. So a big, big thank you to Mark and everyone at BNG. And I also want to draw your attention to the description of the video. You'll see 3 links in the description. The first one is for Boston Bruins apparel. The second one is for NHL apparel from any team. And the third one is for college apparel of any NCAA school. You can get team branded, all sorts of different products, and some really, really good options for all the normal stuff like hats, jerseys, t-shirts, sweatshirts, that kind of thing, but a lot of other accessories and really cool team branded products as well. So if you're in the market for any of those things, whether it's Bruins, a different team, a college, please check out those links down in the description. It really does help out a lot and is very, very much appreciated. But let's get into it here. We're going to start just by taking a look back on this past weekend for the Bruins, their past couple of games, the only games that they've played since last week's episode. So we're going to start by going back here to last Saturday where they played the New Jersey Devils, and it was an afternoon game. And this was a big win for the Boston Bruins. They were coming off a loss to the Edmonton Oilers, a very disappointing loss to the Edmonton Oilers. They had lost, 2 of their last 3 games. They were trying to get back, above 5, or significantly above 500. They were really kind of struggling going into this game. And then all of a sudden, Boston is able to come out with a big afternoon matinee win against a New Jersey team that was very hot going into this game. I think New Jersey was on a 3-game winning streak going into this game. And Boston got the job done. They came out, they got a first period goal from Erik Haula, finally scoring his first goal as a Bruin. So obviously that was great to see. Anytime one of these newcomers from this past offseason is able to contribute. And, it really does help the team a lot. And Haula was really slow out of the gate. He definitely was struggling offensively. Only had 1 assist on the season coming into this game for his only point, and then he finally gets on the goal column and picks up his first goal as a Bruin. Hopefully he's able to build off that and continue to keep getting better as this season goes along. But he gives the Bruins a 1-0 lead in the first period. That was the only goal of the first period. In the second, we had a lot more goals. Brad Marchand made it 2-0 Boston with a power play goal. But then Dawson Mercer responded for New Jersey. Dawson Mercer is a great young player for the Devils. Looking like, he could be one of the best players to come out of that 2020 draft. And he's off to a great start. He scored for the Devils to make it a 2-1 game. But then our old friend Brad Marchand answered again. He scored his second goal of the game, giving the Bruins a 2-goal lead once again. But then the Bruins committed a cardinal sin, and they've done this multiple times this season, but they gave up a goal in the last minute of the second period. Jesper Bratt was able to make it a 3-2 game at the end of the second. And New Jersey was still very much in this. They were down a goal, but they were still very much in this. The Bruins needed a big third period. And that big third period is what they got. They played well. Patrice Bergeron had a great goal to make it 4-2 Boston. That was just past the halfway mark of the third. And then Boston once again had a 2-goal lead, and then Jake DeBrusk finished it off with less than a minute to go. And it became a 5-2 win for the Boston Bruins. It was great to see DeBrusk get on the board. Looking at the team stats here, Boston easily outshooting the Devils 36-29. Boston 54% in the face-off circle. 1 for 2 on the power play, while the penalty kill for the Bruins was 3 for 3. They out-hit the Devils 16-11. It certainly wasn't an overly physical game. Boston also had 25 shot blocks to New Jersey's just 8. I mean, a monster discrepancy there in blocks, where the Bruins were getting in the shooting lanes and not allowing the Devils to get many shots in on Jeremy Swayman, or not nearly as many shots in on Jeremy Swayman as they could have had. I mean, New Jersey could have had 50-plus shots in this game, but the Bruins were blocking them. They were getting in the lanes and, playing pretty tight and well defensively the way that they needed to play, because defense, as we've talked about on this show throughout this year, has been an issue for the Bruins. It was not an issue in this game. Some things that really stood out, obviously, the Bruins' top line and top players are continuing to really, play at an elite level night in and night out. Marchand with a couple of goals, Bergeron with a goal, Pastrnak picked up a couple of assists, and McAvoy picked up a couple of assists as well. So the Bruins' top players are their top players, and they're continuing to put up big point production. But the good news, and something that, again, has been an issue, and that's secondary scoring. The Bruins' secondary scoring was able to contribute as well. Eric Howla scored the first goal of the game. That was assisted by Anton Bleed and Carson Kuhlman, picking up their first assists of the year. And then Jake DeBrusk was able to nab the empty netter at the end and, make it 5-3. And he picks up his third goal of the season. So while the Bruins' top players obviously scored some big goals and contributed in this game, they also got Howla and DeBrusk on the board, which we need to see more of. We need more of these third-line guys, fourth-line guys getting on the score sheet, and that is a very, very good sign for the Bruins that those guys were able to do that. Jeremy Swayman played in goal. He stopped 27 out of 29 shots. He had a .931 save percentage, and it was overall just a very, very, very strong performance for Jeremy Swayman in goal. Made all the saves that he needed to make, and obviously helped the Bruins pick up the win. So that was Saturday's game. Then they played again on Sunday against the Montreal Canadiens. And this was a big game back at home. Bruins playing the Canadiens for the first time since early 2020, before COVID. So it would have been almost 2 years since the Bruins and Canadiens had played each other. And this rivalry was finally able to get renewed. And this was a big game. This was a big game. It was Bruins-Habs, obviously all the history, most historic rivalry in the NHL and maybe in all of sports. And for these two teams to play each other again, finally, after this much time apart, was a big deal. And this was in Boston, second half of a back-to-back. Canadiens were on a back-to-back as well, so that was kind of evened out. But it was a really important game here for the Bruins, and they needed this for the to have a successful weekend. Canadiens have not been good to start the season. Their record is terrible. Boston could not afford to drop this game at home and lose to a team that is down near the bottom of the standings. And the Bruins needed a big weekend to get well above 500 and a chance to go to 8-5 and pick up 4 out of 4 possible points. So what do the Bruins do? Well, they come out and they give up the first goal. Joel Armia scored for the Canadiens, scoring the only goal of the first period, putting Montreal up 1-0. And it was a pretty frustrating start because the Bruins were getting the better of the chances and whatnot, but they were making Sam Montembeault in goal for the Canadiens look like a top 10 goalie early in this game. I was watching this game, and it was very frustrating at the beginning. Certainly got better as it went along, but Boston just overall did not play a very good first period. It was a very kind of, I'm trying to think of the word, like, energy-less. Like, there was no energy in the first period. Like, there was no jump to their game whatsoever. It was very just kind of go through the motions type first period for the Bruins, and that was obviously not good enough, and they needed to get better as this game went along. Luckily, they did that. As in the second period, Charlie McAvoy evened the game up at 1 and scored his second goal of the season for the Bruins, making it a 1-1 game, assisted by Taylor Hall and Jakub Zboril. Unfortunately, though, the Canadiens were able to answer. They scored late in the second period with under 4 minutes to go. Michael Pezzetta picked up his first NHL goal and gave the Canadiens a 2-1 lead again, and that is how the second period would end. So here we are, Bruins playing a vastly inferior opponent at home, down 2-1 heading into the third period. And that obviously meant that the Bruins needed a big third period. Like, they needed a huge third to come back and win this game. And that is exactly what we got. Third period was dominated by the Boston Bruins. They scored 4 goals in the third to Montreal's 0. They ended up winning the game 5-2. Charlie McAvoy scored his second goal of the game and third of the season on the power play to tie the game up at 2. Then Charlie Coyle scored for the Bruins on a puck that bounced off of his head. And past Montembeault to give the Bruins the lead, 3-2. Then Charlie Coyle scored again to make it 4-2 Boston. And then Taylor Hall finished it off at the end to make it 5-2 with his 4th goal of the season. And Charlie Coyle, yeah, the goal that went off his head was actually shot by Jeff Petrie, and Jeff Petrie put it in his own net, trying to clear the puck behind the goal line, I guess. I don't really know what Petrie was doing there, but shoots it right off of Charlie Coyle and into the net. So that was an interesting goal, but Coyle with a 2-goal game, McAvoy with a 2-goal game, Taylor Hall with a goal and an assist. You know, it was a... Anyone else have multi-point games? McAvoy with a couple of goals. Like, that was just a really good, dominant third period for the Boston Bruins. And really good to see them be able to dominate a period that way. Just take it to the Canadiens and skate away with a big 2 points that they needed this weekend. They needed to win both of these games, and they went out and won both of these games. And that's a great sign. They outshot the Canadiens 41-29. Not so good in the face-off dot, but they were 1 for 4 on the power play, so the power play clicked again, got at least 1 goal. Penalty kill, only had to kill off 1 penalty, but they did. Penalty minutes were very one-sided towards the Canadiens, getting 18 penalty minutes to the Bruins, just 2. Hits were almost even, 31-29 in favor of Boston. And shot blocks were slightly in favor of the Bruins, 10-7. So again, another game with double-digit shot blocks for the Bruins. They are getting in the shooting lanes, and that is helping to make life easier for Jeremy Swayman, who once again was in goal for Boston. You don't see goaltenders play both games of a back-to-back set very often in the NHL, but Sweyman is young. He is certainly capable of doing it, and with how good he played in the New Jersey game, the Bruins went right back to him in the Montreal game, and it paid off because once again, it's funny, exactly the same numbers. He stopped 27 out of 29 shots and had a .931 save percentage in this game. So back-to-back spectacular performances for Swayman, making all the saves that he needed to make. .930 plus save percentage in both games. That's exactly what you want from your goaltender. And I'm going to talk in a little bit about Jeremy Swayman and the Bruins goaltending, and it certainly looks like Swayman is kind of taking the reins here in net and taking the lead in this as far as who's going to be the 1A and who's going to be the 1B for the Bruins this year. But again, a very solid, well, a very, very good third period. A pretty frustrating game for the Bruins up to that point, but the third period was so dominant that it makes up for it, and I still leave this game feeling pretty darn good about the team. There is no doubt about that, but all in all, I mean, they won both games. They did their job this weekend. They won both games. They got 4 out of a possible 4 points, and they're now 8-5 on the season. That is exactly what the Bruins needed to do this past weekend, and that is exactly what they did. So kudos to the Bruins for a great weekend and getting the job done, doing what they needed to as they try and climb the standings in the Atlantic Division. But so now just kind of talking more broadly about just this team and where they're at and what's happening right now. The Bruins team that we saw this weekend, and granted parts of the Montreal game was a little bit frustrating, especially early on. The first period wasn't good, but they got better as the game went along, which I think is a good sign. They need to be, better in the third periods compared to the first, where for a lot of the early portion of this season, it was the Bruins coming out strong, having a good first period, and then kind of fading as the game goes on, and maybe even losing it in the later stages of the game. Bruins need to make sure that they're a good third period team. They need to be able to win games in the third. In both games this weekend, they were able to do that. I mean, they scored 2 goals in the third against New Jersey and gave up 0. They scored 4 goals in the third against Montreal and gave up 0. So those are the kinds of third periods that the Bruins need. And just kind of talking about this team in general, consistency is a word that if you watch this show every week, I've been saying it all year long. Consistency has been one of the biggest problems for the Bruins. They're not consistently performing at a high level. There are some games they look like a Stanley Cup favorite, and there are other games that they look like they don't even belong in the playoffs, and we need to see that top-end Stanley Cup contending team more often. We saw it this weekend. Guess that's my main point here, is that we saw it this weekend. If the Bruins play a large majority of their games the way that they played this weekend against New Jersey and Montreal for the most of the Montreal game, they're going to be a Stanley Cup contending team. Now they just need to consistently do it. They just need to consistently play at that level. We've seen what their potential is. We've seen how good they can be. They just did it for back-to-back games. We know that this Bruins team is capable of competing with anybody in the NHL on a nightly basis. They just need to consistently play at that level, and that's been one of the most frustrating things about this team this year, is that we know how good they can be and what their potential is. They just haven't always played up to that potential. I want to see the Bruins team that we saw this weekend, and the Bruins team we saw against New Jersey, the Bruins team we saw in the third period against Montreal. I want to see that Bruins team on a regular basis. Not the Bruins team that played Toronto a couple Saturdays ago. Not the Bruins team that played Edmonton last Thursday night. I don't want to see that Bruins team. I want to see the Bruins team that played this past weekend on a regular basis. The Bruins will be one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference if that team shows up on a regular basis. And it's just all about consistency with this team. It has been all year. It's consistency that is the thing that is holding them back and also can drive them forward to be one of the top teams. Listen, you just had a great weekend if you're the Boston Bruins. You're now 8-5 on the season. You've got 16 points. You have games in hand on a lot of teams around you in the standings. Probably all of them, because Boston is having these ridiculous long breaks without games like we're on right now this week. I talked about the schedule a couple weeks ago. I'm not going to go into that all again, but the schedule is absolutely ridiculous. But that's beside the point. The point is that if the Boston Bruins team that we saw this weekend is the Boston Bruins team that we're going to see on a nightly basis this season, the Bruins should be one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. If the Boston Bruins team that we saw against Edmonton and Toronto shows up, then the Bruins are going to lose bad games. They're going to struggle to make the playoffs. They might be a wild card team. It's just all about which team, like which level of Bruins are we going to see. There were some really good signs this past weekend. I mean, secondary scoring got going. The Bruins outscored their opponents 10-4 in the 2 games. Sweyman was very sharp in goal and played very, very well. You know, only gave up 2 goals each game. They scored 5. You know, everybody was contributing. The power play scored. The top players scored. The secondary scoring guys chipped in. Like, everybody had a role in these games. Even guys that weren't getting on the score sheet were contributing. Like, Nick Foligno. I really wish Nick Foligno got a point in that Montreal game because he deserved it. Nick Foligno had a phenomenal game against Montreal. His forechecking, his puck retrieval, just his pressuring of Canadiens players when they had the puck. Foligno had an outstanding game. He didn't show up on the score sheet, but he had an outstanding game against the Canadiens. You know, like, those guys contributing was great to see this weekend. Like, there were so many positives. The defense buckled down. Finally, the Bruins defense has been one of the biggest issues this season so far. They buckled down. They played well defensively. There haven't been that many games where I've said that the Bruins have played well defensively. They did this past weekend. And then Sweyman was there to make the saves when he needed to. This is the kind of weekend that the Bruins need to build off of. Now, they're not really going to be able to carry any momentum because they've had, 5 days off now, Monday through Friday, without a game, which, again, scheduling is stupid, but it's what you have to deal with. It's the way it is. But this level of play is what we need to see from the Bruins on a regular basis. And I think that's been what's so frustrating about the Bruins this year for me, is that we know how good they can be. We've seen how good they can be, and they're just not always at that level. Lucky for us, though, they were this past weekend. Now I want to see them stay at that level for an extended period of time. There's obviously going to be bad days here and there. There's going to be bad games where the Bruins just, have an off night or just don't show up for a game and they get, beaten or maybe even blown out. And it is what it is. It's a long 82-game season. That's going to happen. And it's going to happen for every single team in the NHL. What I want to see is consistency from the Bruins on a much more regular basis and a large majority of their games. There'll be bad ones here and there, but in a large majority of their games, I want to see the Bruins team that I watched this past weekend. Because that is a darn good hockey team. That is a darn good hockey team that I watched this past weekend. Now they just need to play that way on a night-by-night basis. And if that happens, I'm going to be very, very happy with the Bruins, and they're going to have a good season if that happens. And honestly, this was a great weekend. I was thoroughly impressed with the Bruins this weekend. Like, I left those games feeling good. I was actually happy. A Bruins game came to an end, and I was like, wow, like, that was awesome. That was fun. Especially even the Canadiens game where they didn't play good early. That third period was so good. That third period was so good that I left that game going, holy cow, like, I am happy right now. I had a smile on my face. I want more of that from the Bruins because we know that they have the potential to be that team. You just got to do it. And consistency, again, is going to be the key for this Boston Bruins group. They have the talent. They have the roster. We know they have a good, really good, great coach in Bruce Cassidy. It's just about execution and getting it done, and the Bruins were able to do that this weekend. But moving on now, I want to take a look and talk a little bit here about the goaltending, because I think Jeremy Swayman has definitely solidified himself as the go-to guy for the Bruins. He played both games this past weekend. He played very, very well in both games. Obviously only gave up 2 goals against in each, which if your goals against is 2, you're a good goaltender. Like, that's a great number. You're a great goaltender if you're only giving up 2 goals a game. So, Bruins are going to win a lot of games with that. Sweyman, I think, is definitely set himself apart a little bit from Ullmark. Ullmark has, quite frankly, not been as good as I was expecting. Now, it's still early in the year. There's still a long way to go. He's still probably adjusting to a new team. But I had very high expectations for Linus Ullmark coming into the Bruins. And, you know, I ranted and raved about him this offseason. I didn't just talk about him. I ranted and raved about him this offseason because of how good he played in Buffalo with a really bad team in front of him. And the numbers that he put up in Buffalo were absolutely phenomenal, given the fact that he had the worst team in the NHL playing in front of him. And I thought that he was going to get even better than that when he actually had a good team playing in front of him in Boston. And so far, that hasn't been the case. He's struggled this year. I think his confidence is a little bit shaken. You know, he's giving up too many goals. His save percentage isn't all that impressive. So, I don't know. It's a work in progress with Ullmark. I'm certainly not giving up on him. I don't want the Bruins to just dump Ullmark or go off and trade him somewhere for like a 5th-round pick. Like, nothing like that needs to happen. But he's, you know, you got to give him some time to find his game. But he's not going to be playing as often because Jeremy Swayman is the Boston Bruins' best goaltender. There is no doubt about that. Right now, Jeremy Swayman is the Boston Bruins' best goaltender, and I think he has solidified himself as the 1A for the Bruins, and Ullmark is going to get kind of pushed into that 1B role. It's still very much going to be a mix of the two. I don't think we're going to see... It's not going to be like, you know, Tampa Bay, who plays Vasilevsky like 80% of the time and then plays the backup 20% of the time. It's not going to be like that. We're not going to have, you know, Swayman playing every single game and Ullmark playing like 1 out of 5. I just don't see that happening. I think it's still very much going to be a 1A, 1B type mix. But Jeremy Swayman is the 1A now, and Linus Ullmark is the 1B. And at least with the way that they're playing right now, I think that's how it's going to continue until something happens where, you know, Cassidy may have to change that. If Swayman goes into a little bit of a slump, or if Ullmark gets his game going and Swayman has a hiccup here or there, like, you might see it maybe even out a little more. But right now, with the way that they're playing, Swayman's been the Bruins' best goaltender. And he is the 1A, and Ullmark has been relegated to the 1B position, but he's still obviously going to play some games. But very, very impressed with Jeremy Swayman this year. He has looked really good, making, you know, all the saves that he needs to make for the most part. Great numbers statistically. Very, very happy with the way that he's playing. Ullmark, not so much, but again, it's early. I still think we need to give him some time. And he's shown that he can be a really good goaltender because he was a really good goaltender with the Buffalo Sabres. He just needs to get to that level now with his new team in Boston. But I wanted to touch on the goaltending there because I think Swayman, with what he's looked like this season, especially now with what he did in these back-to-back games this past weekend, has really, you know, put himself in the position where he is the top guy for the Bruins right now, without a doubt. But moving on now, one final thing before we finish this up, I just want to preview the upcoming week of games for the Boston Bruins. So let's take a look here at the upcoming schedule. Like I've been saying, we're on another ridiculously long break without any games right now. The Bruins have 5 days off here. They last played Sunday against Montreal. I'm recording this on Thursday the 18th, so we're on day 4 of the 5 days off. But the Bruins' next game comes on Saturday night, the 20th, against the Philadelphia Flyers. So after this long 5-day break without any action, the Bruins once again have a back-to-back set on the weekend, and they start off on the road in Philadelphia, 7 p.m. game against the Flyers, obviously, on the 20th. And if we go back to October, the Bruins have played the Flyers once already this season, and it was one of the Bruins' worst games of the entire year, maybe their worst game. 6-3 loss for the Bruins against Philadelphia back on October 20th, which was their second game of the season, and it was easily one of the Bruins' worst games of the entire year. I think you could argue maybe their worst, although this little stretch when they were at Florida and then at Carolina was also really bad. But nonetheless, it was certainly one of the Bruins' worst performances, and they're going to look to bounce back from that. They're playing the Flyers now for the second time. Also, Toronto may have been one of the Bruins' worst games as well. So there's a number of games that you could throw in that category of worst Bruins games so far. But the first game against Philly is definitely in the conversation. They'll have a crack at the Flyers again now for the second time this year. They'll have a chance to make up for that in Philadelphia on Saturday night. So we'll see how that one goes. Flyers are decent this year. Carter Hart has been significantly improved this season compared to how he played last year. They are 8-4-2 on the year. They're in the first wild card spot in the Eastern Conference. They have 18 points through 14 games. Bruins obviously are 8-5 through 13 games. They have 16 points. So Bruins and Flyers very close in the standings right now. And this is a big game. Anytime the Bruins face the Flyers, you know, it has some juice to it. It's a good matchup in a big game. But with where these teams are both at right now, this is a very big game on Saturday night. So that's the Bruins' first one. Going to be an interesting matchup there against a evenly matched opponent in what should be a great hockey game. Then they come home for a Sunday night game against the Calgary Flames on the November 21st. And Calgary has been a very pleasant surprise in the Western Conference this year. They're off to a very strong start. They are 8-3-5 on the season, 21 points through 16 games, and they are sitting in third place in the Pacific Division right now. So Calgary is in a playoff spot. They have started the year a lot stronger than a lot of people were expecting them to be. And, 21 points already. They're having a good year. They're also very good on the road. Calgary has had a very good start to the season on the road. So this is not going to be an easy game for the Bruins, especially on the second half of a back-to-back. So, they're going to have to come out and they're going to have to make sure that they bring their A game and get the job done if they're going to win that game against Calgary. But once again, just like last weekend, the Bruins are on the road on Saturday and then at home on Sunday. They're doing the exact same thing this weekend. On the road on Saturday against Philadelphia and then at home on Sunday against Calgary. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. Against the Flames there. But then they've got a couple days off after that back-to-back set. And then the day before Thanksgiving, they play the Buffalo Sabres. That is in Buffalo, a road game. It's, I believe, their second time going to Buffalo this season. If we go back to October, they played Buffalo in Buffalo for their third game of the year. They won that one 4-1 back on October 22nd. Now we go back to November. On November 24th, they play Buffalo for the second time this season, and it is once again on the road. And that's a game that the Bruins absolutely should win. Now, Buffalo has been better than expected this year. They're above 500, which I don't think many people were thinking that Buffalo would be above 500 this season. But right now, they are 7-6-2. They are not in a playoff spot, but they have 16 points, which is the same as the Bruins. But they've played 15 games, so the Bruins do have 2 games in hand on the Sabres. And that's a game that, once again, I expect the Bruins to win. And then finally coming up, Friday the 26th, which will be a week exactly from when you guys are watching this, the New York Rangers afternoon matinee game at home. It's the classic Black Friday game after Thanksgiving for the Bruins in the afternoon. And it's the NHL Thanksgiving Showdown. It will be a nationally televised game on ABC. And this is a big game for the Bruins because the New York Rangers are off to a very, very, very good start this season. They are 10-3-3 through 16 games played, 23 points, and they are currently third place in the Metropolitan Division in a playoff spot. And the Rangers have been very, very strong out of the gate, especially when Igor Shesterkin has been in goal. So this is a difficult game on the day after Thanksgiving for the Bruins. A very, very tough matchup. And it should be a great game. Bruins and Rangers is always a fun time when these two teams play. There's no love lost between these two, even though they're not in the same division. They haven't had a playoff series against each other in a long time. Just, there always seems to be some sort of natural rivalry there. I think it's the whole Boston versus New York thing. There is a strong natural rivalry between these teams. And it's usually a great matchup and a really fun game when they play each other. So this is a big upcoming week for the Bruins. There are really no easy games here. Obviously, the Buffalo game they should win. But these other matchups, you know, Philadelphia is a very tough game. Calgary's a tough game. The Rangers are a tough game. This is a big week for the Bruins. I will say this, the Bruins team that played this past weekend needs to show up this week or else they're going to lose some games because there is not a single easy game on the schedule here for Boston over this next week. So they really need to bring their A game and be playing their best hockey when they face off against these opponents. All in all, honestly, if the Bruins go 2-2, that'll be okay. I mean, that'll be okay. Obviously, you want them to go at least 3-1. 4-0 would obviously be perfect. That would be a dream come true, but that's unlikely given the quality of opponents that the Bruins have to play this weekend. If they can win 2 of these games, I think they'll be okay. Would love for them to get at least a point in another one and, you know, maybe at least go 2-1-1 over the course of these next 4 games. That would be, let's see, 5 out of a possible 8 points. I would be okay with that. If they only win 1 game, that's not as good. That's going to be a little bit more concerning. But there's no doubt about it. This is a very tough little bit of 4-game stretch here on the schedule. There's nothing easy about these matchups. So it's going to be an interesting week for the Bruins. It's going to be a big week for the Bruins. And again, this is a chance for them to prove that they can be and should be one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. If they're able to beat a team like Philadelphia, beat a team like Calgary, beat a team like the New York Rangers, then the Bruins show that they are and can be one of the best teams in the East. Now, if they come out and lose 3 out of these 4 games, or if they come out and lose, all 4 of these games or something like that, then the questions and the concerns about the Bruins are going to continue. And it's all about consistency with this team. Which Bruins team is going to show up? The Bruins team that played against Toronto or the Bruins team that played against New Jersey? Which team is going to show up? And if it's the team that played against New Jersey and Montreal this past weekend, I think the Bruins can have themselves a good week. If the Bruins team that played against Toronto and Edmonton shows up, then we're going to be in a lot of trouble with these tough matchups. So we'll have to see what happens, but I am certainly hoping that the Bruins team that played this past weekend is there to play again this weekend against some very tough opponents on the schedule for Boston. But that is now going to bring us to the end here of episode 44. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Really, really appreciate it. And I want to give, once again, a big thank you to Mark Allred and the entire team at Black and Gold Productions. This show would not be happening without them. This is episode 44 of Black and Gold Weekly. And make sure to check out blackandgoldhockey.com. That is the website for B&G Productions where all the writers and podcasters get their shows out on the website. So great array of Bruins content available for you there. That's www.blackandgoldhockey.com. Once again, don't forget about the links in the description. If you're in the market for any sort of Boston Bruins apparel from any other NHL team or in a NCAA college, then those links are there to check out, and you can get some great products available using those. So really, really appreciate that. But that's going to bring us here to the end of episode 41. Thank you all again for watching. Now, next week is Thanksgiving, so I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to do the show next week. It might be out a little bit later than usual. I might put it out on Saturday instead of Friday, depending on when I can get some time to record for next week. But either way, it will be out at some point next weekend. Episode 45 will be, out at some point next weekend. Just not exactly sure when because of Thanksgiving and have quite a bit going on towards the end of next week. But we'll have a whole new week of NHL Bruins action completed. We'll have a lot more to talk about, and then obviously we'll be previewing a new upcoming week of Bruins action as well. So we'll see you sometime next week. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I am John, your host of Black and Gold Weekly. That's going to do it for episode 44. I'll talk to you guys soon.